What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode, nay, a redeployment episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II podcast. On this redeployment episode, we're going all the way back to episode 95. Why? Because today's August 7th, 2024, but we're going to go back to August 7th, 1942, and talk about the first D-Day, and that is the D-Day H-hour of when the Marine Corps landed on Guadalcanal. And what better way to do that than to have on a historian who's been to Guadalcanal in modern day. Historian Brian Dimitrovich returns for another episode to discuss his trip back to Guadalcanal, as well as Henry reads passages from his father's book, plus much more. Thank you guys for hanging out and your continued support. We'd like to invite you to head over to whatsthescuttlebutt.com or WTSPWWII.com. Click on that Patreon link, sign up and subscribe. It'll only cost you $1 a month. And we just uploaded some Patreon exclusive content, video content that is, of our podcast. We have the Scott Gibson interview, the full interview, video with quality audio. The entire video is up for Patreon exclusivity. You can see 2 or 3 preview episodes on our YouTube channel over at D410 Media, as well as on Patreon. The full interview, the first time Henry Sledge appeared on the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. He shows us artifacts that his father brought back from the war. You can see that entire interview on our Patreon account for $1 a month. Once again, there are 2 preview episodes on our YouTube channel. You can go check those out. And another way you can support what we're doing here at What's the Scuttlebutt is head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com. Click on the merch link. Buy one of our t-shirts, our coffee mugs, our sweatshirts, what have you. We got plenty of items in the merch store. What a great way to not only show support for the show, but to advertise for us, to let people know we're out there. So head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com. Sign up for Patreon or grab a t-shirt. And don't forget, youtube.com, D410 Media. And big news, Jeff did in fact book Dale Dye. He will be on the show the week of the 16th in September. So be sure to bookmark that episode. We'll discuss all things movies, whether it's Band of Brothers, The Pacific, Save It Private Ryan, plus the other projects Dale Dye has been a huge influence on. That'll be a great show. That'll be the week of the 16th coming in September. Thank you guys so much, and on with the show.
Digital 410 Productions proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts Dodd Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Henry Sledge.
New York Times, Dateline, October 4th, 1943. Danish Jews pour across to Sweden. Many refugees are persuaded through Jutland. 1,600 already reported arrested. Stockholm, Sweden, October 3rd. Fleeing the Gestapo terror introduced in Denmark on Tuesday, more than 1,000 Danish Jews reached Sweden, most of them by last night. Braving the icy Øresund, Jewish refugees of all ages and conditions arrived on the Swedish coast. Some even swam the strait, 2 miles wide at its narrowest. Others were rowed across by Danish fishermen who charged $375 to $750 for the passage. Not all those who have tried to cross have succeeded. It is thought probable that most swimmers were seized by cramps and sank. Others crossing in boats were surprised by German Navy mosquito crafts patrolling the straits, and their boats were sunk by gunfire. The refugees said that when the Gestapo intruded on their New Year celebration, some Jews had resisted, and both sides had many killed. Municipal authorities and Red Cross branches in the coastal communities in southern Sweden are lodging and feeding the refugees in schools and other available buildings. Many are destitute. Copenhagen reports said that the Gestapo had concentrated on poor Jews, apparently giving those who could afford a huge ransom a chance to negotiate. Travelers reaching Sweden tonight said that Heimlich Himmler had arrived in Copenhagen to superintend the roundup of the Jews, but this has not been confirmed by any other sources. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II based podcast. And Jeff is not with us tonight. He is out doing whatever he does when he's not here. But we do have Henry Sledge once again. And returning to the show, it's been a year or two. I think he was on season 1, Brian Dimitrovich. Sir, how are you doing tonight?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Good. Real quick, Henry, we talk about a lot of books on this podcast, and people listen like, well, where does he get a New York Times story for October 3rd, 1943? One of the coolest Christmas presents anyone ever got me when I worked in radio. The host of the show I produced, the Stan Haney Show, he got me this book for Christmas, and he's like, this is literally every single story ever published in the New York Times from 1938 to the end of the war that had anything to do with World War II. And
Wow.
I used to do this occasionally. I want to start doing it more. Is I'll go through here, say, okay, what day is this podcast going to air, or what day we're recording, and I'll find a news story from that day that isn't 3 pages long. And so that was what was going on this day in 1943. And think about that for a second. You're a bunch of Jews outrunning the Gestapo. You get near Sweden. There's an icy river. Your options are to swim, and as you heard, most of them died from cramps. But there's some fishermen there who will happily take you across for $350 to $750 1943 money. That is insane.
Inflation.
Yeah, I guess. But anyhow, so I am beat. I am sore. Yesterday was a weird day for me. About 5 months ago, and we don't talk about too much on this podcast, but just to give you guys an idea where I'm at. 5 months ago, I signed up for an OCR race that I've forgotten all about. It was only a 5K, and I joke it's kind of like my first OCR, which is obstacle course racing. That if you guys aren't familiar, I do savage races, but this one's called Rugged Maniac. Here's my medal. It was up in Tampa, 3 miles, 25 obstacles, but since they were easier obstacles, quote unquote, I was able to actually do them all in the first time and finish the race in 33 minutes. But I had to get up at 5:30 in the morning, leave Cape Coral at 6, get there in order to warm up, run a mile, and get to my wave time. Did all that, drove back home 2 hours, ate lunch, and then I had forgotten that I just kind of got in touch with a guy I went to high school with in Grove City, Ohio, who joined the Marines. He was a tank commander, served 3 tours in Iraq and then a tour in Afghanistan. Had been blown up, his tanks blown up by IEDs multiple times. Before retiring, he joined the Wounded Warriors Division. Has nothing to do with the Wounded Warriors Project, but the Wounded Warriors Division, and then retired out of there. And so now he lives in Northport, which is only 30 minutes from where I live, which is crazy that we all grew up in Ohio and then moved down here. And so after getting home, doing this obstacle course race, being super tired, he came down with his kayak, and then we went kayak fishing for 4 hours. And it was so weird to see someone I hadn't seen since June 6, 1997. But we had a good time. I went out and caught a 2.5 pounder, and then got up today, was tired. Me and the wife went out kayaking again today. And
I was about to say, I thought I saw you post something on Facebook. You were on the water again.
In Cape Coral, we have over 5,000 miles of canals.
Yeah.
There used to be a joke back in the day about people selling swampland in Florida. That's here. Cape Coral was developed by 2 brothers who actually started in the, I was going to say pharmaceutical, but cosmetic industry. And so they decided, hey, land development's where it's at. And so they came down to Cape Coral, Florida, paid to dig a bunch of trenches, drained the place, started selling some land, made some money. And there's a great book called Redneck Riviera. Not to get off topic of World War II, but hey, what the hell. Then they decided, you know what, this worked pretty well, but our profit margins weren't quite where we'd like them to be. So then they bought up an area that has now been called River Ranch Acres. They basically took out some trees, put in some service roads, and then went up to Ohio, Cleveland, and New Jersey and sold the property as being part of a fully developed city, which it wasn't. And then long story short, the property got taken over and turned into a private hunting facility. And the author of that book went to claim his dad's land, built a cabin. His cabin was shot up, burnt down. His Jeep was shot up, burnt down. Long story short, the state of Florida took over the property, and people go hunting there now. But the Rosens brothers finally went to prison for just bamboozling people. But to answer your question, because we have so many canals, I have 3 fishable lakes within a mile from my house. So I can come home, load up the kayak, and be out on the water in 15 minutes. And it's, once you buy all the gear, don't need gas money to kayak. And so it's like, hey, let's go out and do something that won't cost us anything. We'll have some fun, and we'll get some vitamin D from the sunlight. So,
I thought when I first got into this gig with you guys, you told me you were really into doing a lot of fishing and posting fishing videos. So that's
I just started fishing in April. I've caught more fish down here in April than I did all the times my dad took me out fishing in Ohio. We'd go on a pontoon boat, and we'd go out at midnight. Oh, we're going to catch some blah, blah. We catch some catfish and all that, but never anything. I've caught in probably since April well to 100 bass down here. We have so many of them. You can keep 15 a day under 16 inches. They just want to get rid of them all.
Nice.
How's your week going, Henry?
It's been good. Been pretty busy, but we're getting ready to go to the beach next week. We're going to go down to Grayton Beach. So that's going to be nice, keeping my son keeps me busy, I should say. So, it's going pretty well. I've had some nice weather, but it's gotten rainy over the last couple of days. So,
Brian, you're back on the show, and I know last night they aired an episode of World War II TV in which you were on, and you were talking about John Basilone, and you and I were talking last week about having you on the show, and then Jeff said, hey, I won't be able to come on this week, and I thought, well, what a perfect time to have Brian on, because he wants to talk about John Basilone, which Jeff loves, but he's not here to hear it, so haha. So give us a little update about how you got hooked up with World War II TV, and then let's talk some John Basilone, because with the exception of a little bit of what we talked about him with Jeff, we really haven't given him a whole lot of credit on this podcast.
Yeah, so a good friend of mine, Paul Woodage, he started a tour company in Normandy years ago. I want to say he's probably been well over 20 years in the Normandy area, and I've been to Normandy and touring with him over the years, and then obviously COVID is driven to a lot of good digital media content.
Mm-hmm.
He's always kind of had this idea for something like this. And I think the whole COVID thing really pushed his hand to do this, and it's turned into something. And he's had some phenomenal guests over the last year. And typically, I think I was actually like the first one to talk about the Pacific on his show, because a lot of his stuff is ETO centric, obviously being in that area.
Sure.
But there is this taste for the Pacific that a lot of them don't know about. So I kind of kicked that off. I want to say it was last year sometime, and then he's had some great shows on. They actually did a live battlefield broadcast from Hong Kong, from the battlefields of Hong Kong.
Wow.
So
the show that just came on, Brian, you said that was done about a year ago?
No, that one was done live yesterday. That was my third time on the show. The first show I did was on machine guns. The second one I did was on the Battle of Alligator Creek. And then this one we focused on John Basilone and Mitchell Page.
Okay.
Now, obviously, most of us are familiar with John Basilone. Maybe before we get into the Basilone talk, Mitchell Page, maybe not a name that a lot of people are familiar with. Give us a little bit of rundown on him.
So Mitchell Page was he was a machine gunner. He was the same rank as John Basilone. He was in H Company in 7th Marines. And he was about 4 miles away from John Basilone's position. So again, for everybody to get up on their Guadalcanal history in a very short few sentences, Japanese start building an airfield on the island of Guadalcanal. 1st Marine Division lands there August 7th, and their entire mission is to hold that airfield at all costs.
Let me stop you real quick, because one thing I just discovered, because I've read Strongmen Armed, I've read other Guadalcanal books, but I'm reading one right now, the one I talked about last week about the battle for Guadalcanal. And one of the things that I didn't know, and a lot of people don't talk about, the Japanese Navy built or started to build that runway without talking to anybody. The Japanese Army had no idea it was there. The Japanese higher ups, they were like, the good thing for us and bad thing for the Japanese, their military branches kind of acted as sovereign nations. They kind of just did what they had the budget to do. And so I'm reading this book and they're like, yeah, the Navy just decided to build an airfield, and it wasn't until the Japanese Army found out about it that they said, well, crap, this is a good strategic strong point. We got to get some guys down here to fortify it. And so to me, it's just absurd to think that you have an empire with these branches of military who have their eyes set at least on a quarter world domination lined up with the Germans, and yet you have the Navy building crap and doing stuff without telling the Army. We all know that, the reports are always wrong. Oh, they go in, get their butts kicked. Yeah, we sank 2 destroyers and 3 aircraft carriers. And so thankfully for us, their egos got in the way, and their fear of being either ran out of office or forced to commit hara-kiri was so high that they just made crap up and did whatever the hell they wanted to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people that have served or are part of military families, here in America, obviously there's rivalries. The Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, everybody. Typically, when you get a lot of people from different branches, the ribbing starts. Typically, like at a reenactment or a living history, we'll be sitting around a fire. You kind of like back away sometimes.
Sure.
Conversations. But the Japanese Army and Navy truly hated each other with a passion.
I've heard it eclipse anything we're aware of in our history.
But to think about in peacetime, that's understandable. But here you are, you're the Japanese Empire. You guys are struggling for resources. Metal's hard to come by. Oil is damn near gone, which is why they attacked us to begin with and started taking over all these properties, because they need the natural resources to fuel their war. And you got the Navy, okay, let's just clear some trees, use some diesel on our equipment, and just build an airfield without even running it by anybody and seeing if maybe we can get some more equipment down here. To me, it's just staggering, especially in wartime, after you did what you just done.
I think I actually it may have been in Strongmen Armed, which I'm going to finish here in the next day or so. When their airplanes were flying into Pearl Harbor, some of them actually had imported U.S. fuel in their tanks.
That's insane.
I mean, not fully, but some of it was there.
That's crazy. Well, I mean, look what's going on now. I mean, over in Afghanistan and the Taliban and all that stuff. I mean, back then the global trade wasn't anywhere near what it is today, but here we are. But anyhow, as you were saying, Brian.
So what ends up happening is there's a big push in August. That's the Battle of Alligator Creek that takes place in September. There's another offensive where the Japanese try to push through. That culminates at the Battle of Bloody Ridge or Edson's Ridge. And then in October is where the Japanese and America are all in. They are everybody is saying this is the definitive battle, which is it strikes people when they first hear that, because you think like, well, there's still a chance, and there's not. And that's what's always drawn me to this battle is that America could have lost this battle
absolutely
half a dozen, 24 times. It was constantly in the balance. The American government is drawing up plans. They're drawing up speeches that for the demise of the 1st Marine Division. Is this going to be another baton? Do we actually go to the table and start talking peace with the Japanese at that point? So this is the criticality point of Guadalcanal. And in October, it's kind of everybody's all in. And the 7th Marine Regiment lands in September. They actually don't land in August. And part of this is Mitchell Page. He's part of the 7th Marines. And Mitchell Page doesn't get a lot of attention, and it's bizarre. And I had this conversation with Richard Frank, and Richard Frank has written arguably the greatest book on the Battle of Guadalcanal. I mean, it's literally, it's called The Definitive Account. And I asked Richard Frank this there, and I said,
just got it in the mail.
Why is it that Basilone, like literally, if you read the Page story, I said I believe that Page's story kind of starts intermixing in with Basilone's story, and like the picking up and running with the machine gun. Basilone does none of that, and I mean literally, he's laying in between 2 machine guns and he's rolling from machine gun to machine gun. He has a pistol, and I'm not taking away anything with Basilone did, not in the least. But Page is literally on a steep ridge by himself, and he has no idea what's about to come up at him. Most of his men are all dead or wounded. He knows what's behind him. He knows the airfield. They're going to have a direct shot right to the airfield. And he decides to essentially lead a bayonet charge down this hill with a water-cooled machine gun, probably weighing around with the water and the ammo and everything, roughly about 50 pounds he's carrying. And he's able to pull together 4 or 5 guys, and he just charges headlong into this Japanese column, just shooting away. And it's enough to freak the Japanese out to go, we don't know what the hell is coming down at us. And for this, he's going to be awarded the Medal of Honor. His action takes place less than 24 hours after John Basilone's action. Basilone's on the 24th or the 25th. Page is on the 25th and the 26th. And, because that's what everybody always says, like, Bazilone's the first enlisted men to get the Medal of Honor. I'm like, yeah, by about 20 hours, but Page is arguably what he does is, I think, far more insane than Basilone does.
I read somewhere, and it may have been in Strongmen Armed. Henry might know because he's reading it now. I think Legge covered that. Wasn't he the one that actually burnt his hands? They portrayed it, that Basilone burned his hand, but it was actually Page, right?
Yeah, it was because Page. I mean, they were ripping their guns, and he had to pick this thing up, and he does. He, as a matter of fact, we just worked with the American Legion. He's actually from the Pittsburgh area, Charleroi to be exact. And over this summer, I worked with the American Legion, and we dedicated a memorial to him in his hometown, which was kind of amazing to all of us. We're like, how the heck does Charleroi not have a monument to Mitchell Page? And got to meet some Marines that knew Mitchell Page.
Wow.
And had photos when he was in Pittsburgh and he was at the American Legion talking. And there's photos of him with the scars still on his arms from the machine gun.
I think, Henry, to answer your question prior about the fact that Basilone kind of got, perhaps maybe his reputation got inflated. Obviously, it's nothing that he did. I think maybe it was part of the quote-unquote propaganda machine on our side. We got Basilone going on tour. He's trying to raise war bonds. How better to get more people out than to just kind of take both these stories, mix them together, and create, we'll use Basilone's face and name and, create this superhero mentality just so we can sell more war bonds and get more money and supplies to back the effort. History be damned.
It might have been a thing where somebody thought that John Basilone was a little more charismatic than Mitchell Page. Sometimes things break that way. You have one guy he's just got that air about him that, and somebody goes, "Hey, he's our guy. We can market that."
Mm-hmm.
And not to take anything away from either one of them.
Sure,
absolutely. And I think too, I've had this discussion before. I think it all depends on who's pushing it too. It's like, where I work at, if you put in, we have awards that are given out at the end of the year. Managers will put in for the awards, and certain managers will, they're able to wordsmith things to make things sound better. I'm sure this happens all across corporate America, and then anything else.
I've never encountered that.
But you know what I mean? It's like, depending on what you got Chesty Puller, that's already a Marine legend in his own right. By the time Guadalcanal hits, that Chesty's going, no, it's my guy. I want the attention on my guy. And again, I'm not saying that this happened or anything, but it's still this kind of mystery where like Basilone he was already a household name.
Yeah.
Before. It's not like, obviously he goes into Marine lore. I mean, after the heroic deeds and being killed on Iwo Jima. And
can I read the last sentence of this chapter 14 in Strongmen Armed?
Absolutely.
It was the hush that comes upon the end of battle, as eerie as that long, white, snake-like blister that ran from the fingertips to the forearm of Platoon Sergeant Mitchell Page.
There you go. And, I was going to think, we as historians and, especially people like me and Brian who do living history now, we kind of look at history as in, done a certain way. It could have been something as simple as somebody came down from the War Department saying, hey, we're looking for somebody for a war drive, preferably a Medal of Honor recipient. And the person asked us, said, what's his, first person came to his mind, that Basilone guy. It could have been something that simple.
Give me him.
Yeah, it could have just been, I wrote up some papers 2 days ago. What was it?
It's like, what was that guy's
John
name?
Basilone. He'll work. Yeah. It could have been something that simple and non-nefarious. We don't know.
But again, not to take anything away from John Basilone.
Oh, sure, not at all.
No. It was like what I talked about on the show yesterday. So, the narrative always is that he's taking on 3,000 Japanese, and for some reason he's barefoot, and he's going 3 days without food, and and this doesn't even happen, and he's actually going up against the 9th Company of the 29th Infantry Regiment, and they're coming at him with 130 guys. Now, Basilone only has 4 guys with him, so it's essentially 5 on 130, which is still insane.
Absolutely.
At that point, I'm probably needing a change of clothes. At that point, I mean, hell, if it was like there's 20 guys coming at you, I would still be utterly terrified. Again, what he does is, I mean, he keeps those guns going. He keeps the ammo coming. Basilone, between his 2 guns that he fires on that right flank, fires over 60,000 rounds of ammunition just out of the 2 guns.
And how many?
That's from his own testimony. I mean, we were able to actually come across his Medal of Honor testimony, and he just walks it down through of everything he fired and what he did, and again, just doing that at night. If you watch the show, I have some of the video of his position. I mean, it is just dense.
Brian, have you ever heard of Joseph Alexander, Colonel Joseph Alexander?
No.
But he wrote Storm Landings. He wrote Utmost Savagery about.
Oh, okay.
Joe was a friend of mine. I went with him to Peleliu in 1999. But he and I talked about the Pacific several times after it came out. And again, not to make the show all about the miniseries, not that that's a bad thing, but we were talking about.
I got my travel Peleliu shirt on. I
saw that. I saw that. But I asked Joe, like, okay, Joe, what were your thoughts on it? How'd you feel about it? And he said, and he liked it, but specifically, what really sticks out of my mind was him talking about Basilone's fight there in part 2. And he said, I think that was as well represented as I've ever seen it, hands down.
Yeah, because when you watch that, it's not the heroic comic book version where he's running around barefoot. He's doing realistic things. He's cleaning a jam out of a gun. He's making the guys are shooting. And what I want to ask Brian, or maybe Henry knows this, I don't know the nomenclature of the machine gun that well. For people trying to figure this out with the amount of ammunition you said he expended, how many rounds does a belt hold on the water-cooled 19, what is it, 1900, the Brown?
1917.
The 1917.
250 rounds.
So think about that, 250 rounds.
Okay.
Yeah.
And obviously he's an expert with this gun, but you still have to change that belt. There's still time in there. Just think about how many times he had to change those belts on those guns to expend that many rounds. And when you're doing that, you're hoping your gunner assistant's laying down some fire with his M1 to give you cover, but that's still an amount of time that machine gun nest, which everybody on the other side is aiming at, because the machine gun nests are what you try to take out first.
Absolutely,
and every time you're changing that belt, you're at your most, vulnerable. Yeah. And just that in and of itself is just tremendous.
Doing it in the dark, and everything is wet, and you're sweaty, and your adrenaline's pumping,
and you're laying in a foxhole with hot brass all over you, because that stuff's just spinning all over you.
Oh yeah, it's just dumping all over the place, and again, just keeping those guns running. There's head spacing that you have to adjust for, because when he went to the one gun, he says that he needed to extract a broken shell out of it. And that is completely indicative of the gun not being headspaced correctly. So what's happening is that gun, it's stripping out a round out of the belt and kind of sliding it down into the barrel. And the barrel is actually screwed into what's called a barrel extension. And they have to set it just right so it kind of slides into that barrel. And if it's off, what'll happen is upon firing or extraction, it'll snap. So it'll actually extract half of it,
wow.
And then the other half stays in, and it won't
and then
allow
stovepipe.
So they actually portray that really well, where he's underneath. Yeah. He's taking a timing gauge, and he's trying to get that piece to flick it out of there. And once he does that, then the gun's back up and running.
And he's doing this in the dark. It's not like they got big mag lights. Maybe at best somebody's got one of those.
He got a headlamp on. And,
maybe at
he's
best
on his back, and
somebody's got a Zippo, maybe if he's lucky. But other than that, he's doing it in extreme dark.
The one thing he said he was terrified of the most was the dynamite. The Japanese used, from my research, and the Japanese, they were utilizing their Bangalore torpedoes. And for those that have seen Saving Private Ryan, there's that scene where they're bringing up those pole charges.
Bring up some Bangalores.
Right, yeah, and they're trying to blow holes in the barbed wire, and the Japanese are trying to do the same thing. But what they started doing was they were actually taking the TNT charges, lighting them, and then throwing them over to try to hit the machine gun positions. And Basilone just said that concussion. He said that was the thing that really jarred him the most. During that action was just that TNT going off constantly, and he would see this.
And also, wasn't it pretty common for like the first Japanese through the barbed wire to just throw themselves on it so their comrades could just scamper up over them?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know that happened there, but
yeah, I mean, they were. I mean, the Japanese were pretty fanatical throughout the entirety of the war, but what I always give credit to the 1st Marine Division during that battle in particular, because they're really facing the A-team. I mean, they are facing the best of the best, both at sea, land, and air. You're talking highly qualified pilots. Their Navy is just on point in the night fighting arena. And, it's, again, what they're doing. But it's their tactics that's holding them back. Basilone, in his own account, says they're a very rugged soldier. They're very tough. But he's like, their tactics seem kind of stupid. He's just like, they just keep coming into this, where after August and September, you'd think there'd be a lessons learned to go, maybe let's not do this. Maybe let's try to find something else.
And to that generation of Marines and soldiers, keep in mind, their grandfathers fought in the Civil War. So to them, I'm sure a handful of them probably sitting there in their foxholes watching the Japanese run at them, thinking this is very, very reminiscent of Civil War and Revolutionary War tactics, where we're all just standing in a field running at each other. We've moved past this for a reason.
Like, holy shit, my grandfather was right. They do just charge at you.
And crazy thing is, we know that Carlson went over and worked with the Chinese army and all that, right?
Gung Ho.
Yeah, and so in Gung Ho, it's interesting how Henry was talking about the first Japanese soldier would land on the barbed wire. Carlson taught his guys to do the same thing. And I almost wonder if maybe he got that tactic from watching the Chinese army. But yeah, and in Gung Ho, you'll see them. And they actually talk about, I think I saw another training video where they show that they fall and they kind of fall and do it in a way that produces the least amount of puncture on them. But yeah, they would just, the first person fall on the barbed wire, make an opening. When you don't have time to go up there with your snippers and cut it open, just first guy takes the hit and everybody else just runs over him.
To underscore what Brian was talking about, I mean, early on, I mean, it was so touch and go for us at Guadalcanal. And I mean, wasn't Vandergrift actually, he was told you were authorized to surrender if worse comes to worse. And I mean, was that before the Getke Patrol or after? It would have had to have been before, because after the Getke Patrol, there was no surrender.
Yeah.
Well, the Getke Patrol, the weird thing about that is that that should have never happened.
Right.
The Getke Patrol was arrogance for the American part, because what's happening is Getke, everybody wants to make a name for themselves at that point. They hear that these Japanese want to surrender at the mouth of the Matanikaw. The operations people and the 5th Marines are coming back, and they're kind of strolling in camp going, wait a minute, the intelligence wants to take a patrol down there. They're like, that is a hornet's nest down there at the Matanikaw. We just got back from there, and those guys they want to brawl. They don't want to surrender. And, Getke goes, obviously, all but, 4 people are massacred. To this day,
famous sabers flashing in the sun.
Yeah, you see it in Guadalcanal Diary. And to this day, those Marines are still MIA, including Getke himself. I don't think there's in my opinion, of being there, and I've been there when there have been recovery efforts.
Really?
For some of the bodies on the island, and to our knowledge, either they were either washed out to sea or eaten by crocodiles. The remains. There's a story that they say that they're never seen again after that, but actually L35 and some of the 5th Marine patrols that are coming through there on their way to the Matanikaw see the bodies in shallow graves.
Wow.
And they just can't. Their mission isn't to bring them back. It's that they're going for other operating purposes. But by the time we're able to kind of get our bearings and thoughts and say, oh yeah, we got those guys buried there, more than likely they've been probably eaten, because crocodiles are very much there's still an issue on the island. We actually had some encounters, and I believe in Robert Leckey's book, he talks about after the Battle of Alligator Creek, where he swims out and he takes the binoculars from the Japanese officer and he swims back to shore all proud, and I think he has a knife in his mouth and references like being a pirate, and then his buddies are looking through the binos and they're going, hey, look, there's that guy you were just out, and the crocodiles are ripping apart. And
yeah, because
geez, I was just out there.
Because in Helmet for My Pillow, he talks the first night there, they see a V shape going down and they don't know what it is. It wasn't until after the battle that they realized they're crocodiles, which, by the way, tonight out on the kayak was the first time I've come across an 8-foot alligator in the canal, less than 30 yards from where we were fishing. So we promptly paddled the other way. But I digress. I just got to get this out there because I know I'll get an email or a message. I think when we were talking about John Basilone, I was talking about changing belts. I wasn't thinking of the timeline. I think I may have said he may have hoped maybe his machine gunner was using his M1. It would have been in 1903, which, to Henry's point, goes to show that when we landed on Guadalcanal, we were still using some old equipment. Them ones haven't been issued yet. Reading the Battle for Guadalcanal and Guadalcanal Diaries, we know that before we even landed there, we had very little information, very little maps. I know they were talking to plantation workers who used to be there, sailors, people who used to work on the coconut, all that stuff, just to get any minute amount of information. And not to mention that we tried to push back the landings as far as we could. We got a week out of the deal because all of our guys...
It's a week. They're like, we'll push it back from the 1st
to the 7th. Because all of our guys have been sitting on transport ships in areas where maybe 25 of them can do some calisthenics for 15 minutes at a time. And so, just, you got guys who went through training, went through more training, and then went to Australia, and someone went to New Zealand, and now they're sitting on ships for 2 weeks. It's kind of like taking somebody and saying, okay, eat junk food, sit on your ass, and then 3 or 4 weeks from now, you're going to go run a marathon. Good luck.
Yeah,
so
really.
Just the hardships that those guys went through just before even getting to combat is just insane.
Their maps were all wrong. As a matter of fact, they're set up in the main divisional command. They're planning this out of a hotel room in New Zealand, and a few guys from the hotel bar mistakenly walk into the planning room, and they walk right in, and there's all these maps of the invasion that they're drawing up, and these guys are like, and nobody was in the room. Yeah. And all of a sudden, the officers walk in, and they're like, "Who the hell are these guys?" And they're just all drunked up, and they're like, "Oh, sorry, we went in the wrong room." And they're like, "Get out, get out, get out!"
And by the way, shut up.
Yeah, and again, it's the planning that's taking place. Iwo Jima, Okinawa. I mean, everything is planned to the T. I mean, the support structure, the infrastructure. Guadalcanal, there is just none of that. I mean, they dub it. I mean, it's Operation Shoestring. I mean, it's just they're planning on the fly. Vandergrift's like, okay, I got half my division in Samoa. I got some here. So it's really a miracle. What's happening and all throughout the battle. I mean, there's stories of there's a story where the torpedo bombers were all down at the time. I can't think of the guy's name. I think it was Geiger's personal pilot. He came in with a Catalina.
Yes.
And,
hand grenades.
Yeah. Well, so he flies in. So he's coming from Espiritu Santo, and he's flying back anything he could fit into the plane. And he says, "Hey, throw a couple torpedoes into the Catalina." And so he lands.
Jack Cram, wasn't it Jack Cram?
Yes, that's it. And he says, "Hey, I got torpedoes for you guys." And they said, "Well, that's fine, but we just sent all the torpedo pilots on the front line. We gave them rifles because none of the planes are flyable." So he's like, "Ah, crap." So they said, "Well, hey, we can rig the torpedoes on the Catalina, and you can drop a torpedo from the Catalina. And so they rig up the Catalina, which if anybody just look up a PBY Catalina, what it looks like, it's a flying boat. And he's like, I've never done torpedo bombing. And there's a guy in the Jeep on the way to the plane, and he goes, my brother's a torpedo bomber. He goes, I'll tell you all you need to know. Yep. And so he's getting his lesson in the Jeep ride to the
Third
plane.
hand.
And he ends up dropping a torpedo on a jet. So it's like the pilots are on the front line. You got the PBY Catalina guy rigging up torpedoes to drop from the plane. It was.
Hey,
can
I read? Are you guys familiar with this book?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So this is my dad's copy of this, and then I want to just augment what Brian's talking about.
Hold on real quick before you do. Just on the subject of the Catalina, for those you listening at home and you're in your 40s, just think of the plane that they used in the cartoon Chippendales Rescue Rangers, and it looks just like that one.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Henry. I had to get that joke in.
Oh, yeah. Can you see? I don't know if you can see that, but Sid Phillips, that's his handwriting. Okay, my dad gave him this book because everybody, you know how it is. All the guys got these books pursuant to whatever division they were in. Well, you know, my dad and Sid each got one. My dad took his copy, gave it to Sid. Sid wrote his notes on Guadalcanal, Cape Gloucester, and then my dad wrote his notes on all his stuff. And likewise, Sid gave Dad his. But right here, you talk about the planes coming in, and Brian, as Don knows, Jeff and I are huge World War II aviation aficionados. But as the planes came in, the men cheered and threw their helmets into the air. Sid wrote a little area that says "Hi" into the air. I actually saw tears of joy running down the cheeks of some of my youngsters, wrote a regimental commander. And then Sid wrote in here, pilots and tail gunners would wave to us, banking low around the field. Yeah, here's another quote. The troops yelled, let the bastards try to bomb us now.
Yep.
So can you imagine, I mean, the rush, seeing those Wildcats and SBDs coming in when you've been on at the, you know, the pointy end of the spear, so to speak, with shoestring resources.
Not to mention the George S. Eliot had been sunk with all of your stuff. And so now your resupply's gone. The Navy had pulled out. Right. So now you're living and fighting with what landed on the beach and whatever food you can scrounge up from Japanese camps or whatever may be left on the beach.
Absolutely.
You talk about, I've always wanted to tell a story. I don't know if obviously you wouldn't have heard this story, but I have a great Sid Phillips story. And this actually happened at the Reading Air Show. Oh, I don't know. This was probably like 8 or 9 years ago, and Sid was there with the Valor Studios people.
Right.
And he was there with his family and his sister Catherine, and so he wanted to see an 81 millimeter mortar. And I'm a huge mortar nut, and I said, hop in the Jeep. I said, let's go. So I take him to the camp. We show him, the 81 millimeter. He starts talking about stories, and a crowd starts gathering. And a crowd, and there's this young couple, and they ask him. They said, "Sid, question: what are your feelings now on the dropping of the atomic bomb?" And I'm like, really? Like that's what you're gonna. It's like kind of a nice, joyous occasion. You have this veteran telling his stories and his memories, pointing out stories of the mortar, and that's the question you come with. And Sid looks at him, and he's standing right next to me, and he goes, well, he's like, looking back on it now, he goes, I guess I have a few regrets. And I kind of look at him, and he goes, my biggest regret is I wasn't on the Enola Gay to pull that lever myself. and everybody goes crazy. And then he leans over to me, and he goes, hey, don't tell anybody, but the favorite tractor on my farm is a Japanese tractor. He's like, just keep that between you and me. And,
hey, to the victor goes the spoils. I got a Volkswagen and a Tundra, so hey, to the victors goes the spoils.
Absolutely.
So let's get into Baz Loan's history a little bit. We know he served time in the Army. Let's get into that a little bit and then progress into his contributions and what led up to, we spoke about it briefly, but let's just give the Cliff Notes versions for people who are listening who aren't as well versed in the topic as the three of us.
So Basilone joins the Army in 1936. So he spends time in the Philippines. He gets out of the Army in 1939, and there's obviously a sense that something's brewing. 1939. Obviously, there's stuff already kind of kicking off between the Japanese and the Chinese. You have the Marco Polo Bridge incident, which a lot of historians really, that's the official dates of World War II really kicking off. Most everybody, goes to the September 1st of 1939. So John Basilone knows that there's going to be probably a huge fight coming up. Wants to go in, wants to be the toughest, wants to be the best, and joins in the Marine Corps in 1940. A fun piece of trivia fact that a lot of people really don't know is that John Basilone never went to Parris Island boot camp. He never went through Marine Corps boot camp. So I've actually ruined a few of my friends that have, Marines, career Marines, and they like, holy crap, it's like time we're at Parris Island, we always say, like through these doors have come some of the great Marines, and I'll rattle off names like John Basilone. And I'm like, yeah, he never was there. I said the Marine Corps was essentially like, look, we want you to be a machine gunner. It's the same machine gun. You got experience. We need NCOs, and you're going to go right into the fleet. And he actually gets assigned to the 5th Marines out of the gate, and then later on he's transferred to the 7th Marines. And from there, he just starts training and with machine guns, and is somebody that has some experience with machine guns and is an expert. And obviously, once the 1st Marine Division is formed, he's part of that, and that's he starts his journey along with the 1st Marine Regiment, 3rd Marine Regiment, 5th Marine Regiment, 7th Marine, 11th Marines. To New Zealand and Guadalcanal, because a lot of people think that there's this Europe first mentality. We're going to wait on the Pacific. That's you hear a lot of that in like TV shows now and books and everything. But if you really dig into it, we were mightily concerned with the Japanese, because people were coming back. Admiral Fletcher's coming back, going, these guys are violent, and they've taken out us, they've taken out the British, they've taken out the French, they've taken out the Netherlands, the Dutch. They're like, they are for real, and if they keep expanding, we're gonna be in some real serious issues here, and so that's really what Guadalcanal is. They're like, hey, they're now building an airfield that could potentially sever
Australia.
Lifeline to Australia. Originally, our original plans were we were going to use Australia kind of how we used England in Europe,
right?
That we were going to stage everything there, and we're like, if that gets cut off, we're going to be SOL, and so that's really why Guadalcanal is. And the Japanese really aren't on Guadalcanal that long. They actually they take it in May of 1942. So they take Tulagi, which Tulagi is about 20 miles away. That's the British really own the Solomon Island territories, and they take it in May. And actually, part of the reason why the Battle of Coral Sea happens is because we hear that the Japanese take Tulagi, and a detachment of fighters are sent out to just go bomb them, and the Japanese aren't stupid, and they're going, wait a minute, those are carrier-based planes. There's got to be carriers around here. So let's start sending people out, and that's really what kind of kicks off the Battle of Coral Sea. And then they start building the battle, or they start building up the airfield on Guadalcanal. And actually, Guadalcanal is not even in a lot of the actual battle plans early on. The actual code and the orders within the operations are Tulagi and adjacent areas.
Yeah, I think
Tulagi is the prize, and then we realized early on that Guadalcanal is the prize, not Tulagi.
And as said before, the Navy built the airstrip without the Japanese Army even knowing. And in the book I was reading, the Japanese Army even considered it as the insignificant little island of Guadalcanal until they discovered that the airstrip was being built. But you were just saying that they didn't really land there until May, which is another thing that goes to lead to our benefit. We know later on that Tarawa, Peleliu, Okinawa, the battle was so hard because they had spent so much time before we got there reinforcing everything. Could you imagine how much more severe the Battle of Guadalcanal would have been if they had been there for a year? A year and a half?
Yeah.
But the fact that they only had 3 months to try to fortify it was another kind of happenstance in history to help us at least gain that early foothold, especially considering, as we were saying early, the whole Operation Watchtower was kind of just thrown against the planning board and let's see what sticks. Let's get McCain to try to scrape up some airplanes. Let's get some guys out there. Let's try to send some naval strikes onto it before we land. But the whole thing was just kind of thrown together post haste because of not to steal a word for the ETO, but from the blitzkrieg of how fast Japan was moving through these islands and taking up stuff. And as you were just saying, we have to stop them before they got to Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, Port Moresby.
Yeah, and to the fact that, once again, when I say throwing up the wall and stick, we didn't even have time to combat load our ships. So when they got to New Zealand, and New Zealand dock workers like, we're not working that hard, we're going on strike. And the Marines like, no worries, we got guys on the ship who ran that same equipment back there, so get the hell off the docks, we'll take care of it. And it's so insane.
And it's raining, it's cold.
The famous story of the cornmeal or the
cornflakes
mushed on the pier.
Oh yeah, they're just rolling it down the conveyor. They're like, hey, we got to combat load this ship, and the Marines are like, what the hell's a combat load? They're like, just throw it on. They're loading up Lewis guns.
I just learned what a unit of fire was last week. Brian, I was telling Henry this a few weeks ago. Long before I did the podcast, I was out on a computer job in Fort Myers Beach, and in front of an ice cream place, there was a gentleman sitting in the passenger seat of the car, AC running. His daughter was inside buying ice cream, and he had a 1st Marine Division hat on. And so I asked him when he served, and he basically said early 42 till like 44. And kind of like you were saying with Sid Phillips, okay, here's my chance to ask this guy a question. And so I just said, so were you in New Zealand for the union worker strike? And his eyes lit up because I'm sure through his entire life, people want to hear, how many Japs did you kill? Or where did you... And me, I'm talking, and me and this guy just sat there for 15 minutes talking about him working the union dock, because here's a part of history that he lived through that at this point wasn't traumatic, and the fact that some random 35-year-old in Florida knew about it, his eyes just lit up, and we just sat there and talked about the union workers strike for like 15, 20 minutes till his daughter came out with the ice cream and they took off. I so wish I had the podcast back then, but to me, I just got the big thrill out of it because I know this guy's probably been inundated with the worst questions you could ask him, and that.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's like those are the things that those guys, really. They latch on to, and that's, and obviously too want to talk about, sometimes like maybe some of the more lighthearted, non-combative, stories and things like that. And, there are some Marines out there that, and airborne vets that I've met over the years. My wife and I used to host a spaghetti dinner every month. We used to live in Erie, Pennsylvania. And Erie, Pennsylvania was just kind of like airborne row.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would have 82nd and 101st vets to our house for spaghetti dinner. And my wife at the time, her grandfather served in the 6th Armor, and she grew up going to reunions and things like that. And I'm like, this is a little bit different of a crowd. And I said, it may get a little hectic. And they had no problems talking about, certain things. And then arguments would ensue where we would have to potentially pick up knives off the table. It was like, the reason you were in I company stood for idiot, and that's why you were there, and go back and forth. So, but there's some vets that, that they prefer to, talk about some of the lighthearted stuff and, some of the other things that the nuances of, military life back then. But, I would like to, Basilone, I think, I don't know. I said he seems like the type that would have, I think he probably enjoyed what he did.
And I'm sure he, when the early reports and when he was on that USO show tour, I'm sure when he's reading the newspapers of his quote unquote exploits, I'm sure he would probably be the first one to roll his eyes and be like, This is insane. But let's get to that real quick because we don't want to end the episode without getting to that. So he got his Medal of Honor. They sent him home. He went on the USO tour. How long was he on that tour before he decided to go back and train guys on the machine guns?
I'm unsure of the timeline, of that, because goes back in 43, because he's notified in May of 43 that he's going to get the award, and this is another thing, to his own words, he's actually when he's told that he's going to get the Medal of Honor, he thinks it's for an action that he does in November. They asked him, they said, "What is your best memory, your most fondest memory of Guadalcanal?" And he said it would have to be the November actions, like near Gavaga Creek and when they were hunting Japanese in the jungle for 18 straight days. And he thinks the Medal of Honor is actually for an action that took place in November. And they were like, "No, it's for the October battle." And he's like, "Oh, okay." It didn't even like register in his head that it was like that big of a deal, for him. And so then, he's notified in May, he gets awarded in Australia, he's sent back. I don't know the timeline of when he goes from the USO tour, back in and into the to the 6th Marines and starts training, and then ultimately landing on Iwo Jima, and then killed during the initial invasion, the assault. So and again, he's awarded the Navy Cross for his actions for the Battle of Iwo Jima. So he's again a household name during the war, even to this day, that if you bring him up, people know the name, and he has earned everything. I mean, giving his life in service to his country, and for the Marine Corps, which he loved, it's talking about the story, and that's why I feel bad sometimes when we talk about these. You get kind of the nerd circle that we talk about certain things where and sometimes some people kind of look at it almost disrespectfully, like we're disrespecting them in some way, and it's just really trying to separate that fact and fiction. And sometimes the facts are even more amazing than these tall tales that get bred out of these stories. And it's again, just for me, the battle has always held a special place in my heart, and some of these guys that really made it happen, because if not, it turns into a much different story for the
Absolutely.
battle.
Well, we mentioned it a few weeks ago. The fact that Lena got married and became a widow at 33, being a 43-year-old guy, I know how young 33 is, and to never remarry, to me, is just, one, it obviously shows the love and passion she had for John, but it's almost in and of itself a tragedy, because you wonder how much on life did she miss out on, to go from 33 up until the age she passed away, not creating a new family and perhaps extending a bloodline. It's just that in and of itself is a tragedy too. So it's almost like, I don't want to say a wasted life, but you're not living up to your full potential. So it's almost like when he did pass, he kind of took half her life with him, and she was just so devastated and heartbroken that she just never remarried, never formed a family, and that in and of itself kind of adds to the tragedy. At least I feel that way when I read it into it.
That time period is such a unique, and I think it probably sticks with a lot of men, whether it was men and women throughout the World War II, Korea, Vietnam. But to me, growing up, hearing the stories from my family, what it meant to them. My wife's grandfather, he served in the 6th Armored Division. When he was going, my father-in-law was going to go get married. He goes, "Dad, I'm getting married," and gave him the date. And my wife's grandfather said, "Well, I won't be there." And my father-in-law was like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Well, that's the Company B reunion." And he said, "You got it." And they had to reschedule their wedding for his unit's reunion. And when he passed, one of his battle buddies just crying over his coffin, and he wasn't there when my wife's grandfather was wounded, and he was crying, and he was just saying, he goes, I wasn't there for you, Milt. I wasn't there for you, Milt. I wasn't there for you, Milt. And I told my sister-in-law, I said, that man probably knows more about your grandpa than your grandma ever did.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, this time period, and again, Henry, the stories that you were telling the other day on that show about your dad, when
Right.
when your mom said, there's your mom, there's your dad, there's Ak. It's just like this time period, and these people that live through it. It's such a unique time period, and it stayed with them throughout the entirety of their lives, and it meant so much to them, as miserable as it may have been, and for the good or for bad. I mean, it's just part of their DNA.
Can I share a little quick story?
Yeah.
Because you brought that up. To your point of the mindset, and I've heard my mom tell this story, but it wasn't that long after they were married. They were in the car going somewhere. This probably would have been around Auburn University, early 1950s. My dad would have been in graduate school. And they're driving down the street, and there was a squirrel in the middle of the street that had been run over. And it's eviscerated and bloody and mangled. And, they just drive by. And my mom's like, oh, look at that poor squirrel. And she said my dad was just kind of, arm on the steering wheel looking out the window. And she said he kind of looked at her and said, I had friends that looked worse than that. And that, something in that just, it kind of, it grabbed her. She's like, Jesus Christ, I guess I never really thought about it. Because, it's not like my dad talked about, just a few years ago, I was going through Peleliu and Okinawa. But to your point, it informed their entire thought process for the rest of their lives.
Yep.
Yeah, it's you just can't even fathom it. Like you said, like to sit there and go, like, what do you mean? Like you never remarried, you never did this. But it's just like in her mind, it's just you're throwing this generation of kids into the greatest cataclysm in human history, and they're like, it's up to you to essentially, for lack of a better term, and not trying to be cliche about it, but it's like, you guys are responsible for like maintaining world order.
And you're 18.
Yeah.
You can't get your 18-year-olds to move out of your house nowadays, let alone do things around the house and mow the grass without giving you grief. It's up to you guys to save the world. And, and as you were saying, not only that, but things were different back then. It was quite common, and it would be kind of frowned upon, even though we're supposed to be this new world society where we don't judge. But it was, quite common for, if a brother were to die and the other brother was single, that he would step in, marry the widow, take care of the family, and move on. And I mean, that happens even into the early mid 90s when my uncle passed away. 4 or 5 years later, my aunt ended up marrying his brother just because that was the way it was supposed to be. And to modern day people, that seems really weird, but that was quite common back then. And so, kind of like you're saying, her not remarrying, to me, as I said, it seems tragic, but I'm looking at it from the 2021 perspective, not the 1944, 1945 perspective.
Right.
Things were a lot different. And I'm sure, Henry, you run into this, and Brian, you probably do too from your research. When I try to read some of these news articles to record them for the podcast, there's just minute lingo and even grammar differences between 1944 and 1997 when I was going to school, and now that I have to like reread it like 4 or 5 times before I can regurgitate it, because their way of writing things, even just basic writing a newspaper article, is completely different in the way we do things now, let alone their way of life and religion. And so just something as basic as that, or if you ever, I'm sure I got a few of them here, every once in a while you're walking through an antique store, you'll find an old Time or an old Life magazine from 1942, and you're reading through the advertisements or the letter to the editor, and just the way they write was just so much different back then.
Yeah, and even going further back, I mean, a good friend of mine, Aaron Conklin, he's got this. They reprinted it, but it was like Stars and Stripes. But during World War I, and there was actually like they had this souvenir bound thing of all of the issues that were issued out during the First World War, and he had a copy of this, and I was just reading through some of the articles, and this was from the First World War, and like you said, it was like, wow, the phrases, the terminology, and everything like that. You're going, oh, they talk like that, and even you see on the reels and things that high pitched mid Atlantic voice, and that was actually like a real thing. It's a vernacular that was used back then, and people had that accent, and so it is sometimes you gotta look through certain lenses. And again, talking about the Battle of Guadalcanal, people when they hear it, I always say you gotta look through the lens of 1942, not through the lens of 1944 or 1945. There's no question that we're going to take Iwo Jima. There's no question that we're going to take Okinawa. It's just going to be what is it going to cost? We're not going to pull back from this. And that's, again, you in certain things you can't look through it through the lens of, now 2021 of really with anything. You have to kind of remove yourself and kind of put yourself into that time frame to really understand it, to go, why the heck would they be doing this, or why were they doing that? So
absolutely. Before we wrap it up, I got to get the plugs out of the way. This episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast has been brought to you by our friends at Computers. At Computers has been providing IT solutions since 2004. And even if you don't live in Southwest Florida, they can help you via their website remotely, as long as you have working internet, of course. So give them a call at 239-283-1120 or head over to act-capecoral.com and hit the Contact Us link. And if you do live in Southwest Florida, you need computer repair, laptop repair, network expansion, server migrations, what have you, anything technical related, give them a call at 239-283-1120 or head over to act-capecoral.com. And while you're on the internet, please head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com and click on that orange Patreon link. That helps to go to support the show and help us pay for the little overhead we have here. And I want to thank everybody who is currently a Patreon member. And while you're there, also please click on the link, go to our YouTube channel and subscribe, and help us get the listenership up there. Henry, do you have anything you want to plug or get out there to the awareness to the audience?
Actually, this is perfect with Brian being here. Quickly, I will say the We Happy Few 506 episode will be, the next one is October 9th. I will not be part of it. My family and I will be on vacation, but it is going to focus on the Barcelona story. It's going to have, of course, the same crew that was there, but it's also going to have Josh Bitton, who played J.P. Morgan. And I really enjoyed talking to him a couple of weeks ago in a Zoom meeting that we did. But it's the next episode. It will be live, and it is going to focus on the Barcelona story.
Fantastic.
So, I'll be on the episode after that, I guess, because I'll be back from being out of town. But that will be October 9th.
Brian, do you have any plugs, or where can people go to find out more about you or any of the things you want to support or get out there?
No.
Well, I didn't know if you had any living history groups you wanted to promote or anything like that. Any events coming up?
No, I mean the only really two big events that I do, obviously, the Reading Air Show that takes place in Reading, Pennsylvania. It's a World War II weekend. Happens first weekend in June. If you're ever in that area, it is well worth the time to visit it. Typically, it sees 40, 50,000 people. You could see B-29s in the air, B-17s, all kind of rare aircraft.
How many Corsairs?
There. I mean, it is just. It's crazy because like we're doing our Pacific themed encampment, and we're right at the entrance of the taxiway. So there's many mornings where I get the authentic wake up where I'm in my tent and Corsairs are revving up, and it's actually blowing the flaps of the tent, and we're getting the exhaust through the tent, and you're waking up, you're like, oh man, the planes are, you're sitting there going like, yeah, it's a good feel. And then the other big event that we do every year is D-Day Conneaut. It's the largest D-Day reenactment in the United States. It's in Conneaut, Ohio, and it's again a very, very large scale event. Again, sees well over, I think it's 2,500 reenactors. There's pyrotechnics, landing craft, living histories throughout, and it's 40,000 people that attend to that. So those are two big events. I always recommend to people. Again, it's in northern Ohio on Lake Erie. And always recommend that to people. But
as a Columbus boy, that's one that I really need to get up to. It's funny. I was at either Sun and Fun or another air show a few years back. And by the way, I forgot to mention this last week. Facebook shared me a picture of my first reenactment. I've been doing living history for 9 years now, and which blows my mind. But back to my point is, it's crazy to wake up in your tent. And then you open the flaps and you see, as the sun's coming up, a World War II era aircraft sitting at the open flaps of your tent. And it definitely brings it in. But hey, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us for another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II based podcast. I'm Don Abernathy, and for Henry Sledge and Brian Dimitrovich, thank you guys for hanging out with us. Jeff Copsetta will be back on the next episode. And as always, thank you guys so much. And please like and share us with a friend. Let's get those numbers up and share our history with everybody else. Henry, thank you. Brian, thank you. And we will talk to you all next week.
Thanks for having me.